Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 6th day of action, I believe, in the Airthings Masters. Today's recap will feature the semi-final matchups between Magnus Carlsen and Vladislav Artemyev, and Yan Nepomniachtchi and Andrei Yesipenko. Now, I wanted to obviously originally make the thumbnail Magnus and the three Russians, because that would have been quite cool. You can take a lot of artwork to do that, but today's, look, I mean, if you've seen the news, if you haven't seen the news, I don't know how on earth you couldn't have possibly seen the news. Today, Russia launched an invasion of Ukraine. And I'm not going to pretend to be a foreign policy expert. I'm not going to be one of these influencers or creators that immediately starts a spiel of something that I just researched just about an hour ago. All I can say is I'm sure many are feeling a massive sense of anxiety, what this means for the citizens of Ukraine, innocent people who are going to die for absolutely no reason. We haven't seen something like this really since World War II. I mean, this takes us back to 1930s, 1940s. I've spoken to several people who are older, more experienced than myself, and they're basically saying this is the collapse of the post-World War II order. And it's a crazy, crazy, unfortunate, and completely unnecessary situation. And Yan Nepomniachtchi and Andrei Yesipenko actually spoke out, and so did Peter Svidler and other Russian grandmasters. So kudos to them, because I cannot imagine being a high-profile athlete in a country going to war, frankly. I mean, I just can't imagine that. And in a year like 2022, I feel like everybody has access to social media. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody is going to say things in pro or in a con, whether as the situation is developing. You're also going to have people that just don't, they're just going to troll and they're going to instigate. So I just wanted to get that off my chest. This is not a foreign policy channel. This is not a politics channel, but it's 2022. People should not be in this situation. It is crazy. And yeah, my heart goes out to the citizens of Ukraine, to the citizens of Russia who don't want this happening, to the citizens of Europe and everything in between. And on that note, we have to talk chess. That is the purpose of this channel. You're more than welcome to have peaceful discussions in the comments. I feel like this should be a serious video, and we should stand with the citizens of Ukraine. Let's begin. Yan Nepomniachtchi against Andrei Yesipenko. This is game number 1. We have e4, e5, and we have an Italian bishop c4, bishop c5. We have castles, knight to f6, and both sides have castled, c3 played. And unlike Andrei, who basically plays a4 at any given moment, Yan is playing a little bit more thoroughly for the center of the board with the move d4. We have d6, rook e1, and Yesipenko, just as he does with white, with black also plays a5. This is just very hilarious to me. I mean, at this point, this man just absolutely cannot be stopped. I'm almost shocked he did not play e4, a5, like I said. So he plays a5. This is obviously to stop white from doing anything over here, to bring the bishop back to a7, h3, h6. And at this point is when the dance of the middle game will begin. The pieces are going to take up their space. They're going to take up their squares. They're going to target the enemy side and try to... I feel even weird with Russian players making such statements. Like they're going to... I mean, it's just... Okay, let's just focus on the chess, okay? Bishop to b5. White intends to take the knight, removing control of the center and maybe playing for d4. And this is one of the benefits of the bishop being able to go here, right? It's the pawn moved up to a5, so the bishop is able to go to b5. Black plays knight d7. This is an interesting idea from Yesipenko. He's basically saying, look, if you take on c6, I'm actually completely fine with this. I'm also completely fine with this, because I'm going to go here. Very interesting. I mean, he just wants to regroup on e5 with his knight and get a position like this with very active bishop. Yan doesn't bite. He doesn't go for any of that. He plays knight f1, and now here comes d5. So this is the other idea. He puts a pawn on d5. e5 now is quite well protected with the knight on d7. The players trade bishops, and the players trade pawns. The players also trade bishop for knight, and we have the following situation. Now, black is structurally worse. He has doubled isolated c-pawns and an island pawn on a5. However, what does black have? Strong bishop. Black also has the b file, right? So rook b8, and black has queenside play. The thing about having a position like this is that you have open lines. At least you doubled up on the c file. You can use the b and d file to your advantage. What does Yan have? Yan has a knight coming to f5, which is $1 million piece in many of these positions, and he has potentially another knight coming to help, so Yan might be creating an attack on the king. Yesipenko here just seems completely unafraid of this, of these, kind of forces coming over to that side of the board. He plays queen f8, which, I mean, that looks like he's a little bit afraid, but he's just ready to play g6. And that's what he does. He just removes the knight, removes it, and just goes for an attack on the other side of the board. So the fact that his structure is not that good doesn't really matter, because a move like b3 is just met with pawn takes b3. And if you take with your own pawn, you lose your rook. So that can't work. So queen c3, knight takes c4. Jan has sacrificed the pawn in order to kind of fight back on the queen side, but that's where black is stronger, right? I mean, these knights went forward in order to attack the king. They're not going to be able to attack the king now. And Andrei is beginning to break through on that queen side and maybe be a pawn up. Knight f3, takes, takes, takes. Uh-oh, Yesipenko's up a pawn. He's got 5 pawns versus 4 with black. This is the worst position that Jan might have had since round 1 of the prelims when he lost to Levon. So great position right now for Yesipenko. Queen c5 played. We have f6. And at this point, something wild happens. So you'll notice rook a1 is just an exceptional move. If you take, you lose your queen. If queen takes, I take check, then I take your queen. I mean, Yesipenko's playing a beautiful game. He's simplifying on the queen side. He's got to pass c-pawn. Everything is going well. He plays c5, rook e3, c4. Just, that's it. I mean, the position's just going to play itself, right? Just queen b4, king g7. I mean, what is Jan doing? Like, what? Pawn's going to just b2, b1. There's not even queen c7. This is over. This is absolutely over. Okay, rook d3. One final attempt to try to get into the position. Thwarted. Queen c7 check. King g8. Losing for Andrei. What? Apparently, king h8 had to be played. Because here it looks like you're completely covered up, but knight h5 out of nowhere. And now you are threatening queen g7 mate. Knight takes f6. But worse, if you take the knight, it's a check. You had to put your king on h8, because if knight h5, then you can take. Rook g3 is not a check. The rook meets you right there, and black wins. Out of nowhere comes knight h5, and now Nepo is completely winning. Queen e5, it's +5 for white. The knight can go somewhere, but the threat is knight d7 just winning the rook. The queen is about to take everything. Knight c6, Andrei playing only moves. Queen to f4. G5. Queen f4 threatened mate in 2. G5. Queen f5. I mean, just G3. The game is over. I mean, it's literally +5. It's over right here with the move rook to d7. Rook to d7. Actually, wait. Rook d7. No, wait, not rook d7. Rook d6. Rook d6. Not rook d7. Rook d7 looks like it wins because knight d7, queen h7. But you can have this, b2. Insane, and it's actually a draw by perpetual check. Rook d6 is the winning move. Cutting off the queen from the defense of the knight, you can't take because of mate, and there's really nothing black can do. Black is just, I mean, you're just going to checkmate in a couple of moves. But Jan plays rook c3. Now, I'm sure both players low on time. Rook c3, and uh-oh, queen e7. Knight d5, white is still attacking, but uh-oh. Rook c7, rook f8. Incredible moment. Danger levels by Andrei Yesipenko, saving the position. Saving the game. Rook c8, knight d7, again only move, cutting the queen, and we have a trade, and black is out of the woods. He sacrifices his knight, and it's just perpetual check. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. The first game is a draw, and we are just getting started. I mean, that game, Andrei was just winning. He had to make a different king move. Jan broke into the position. All right, it's on to game number 2. We have another e4, e5. This time we have a Spanish. So Andrei goes for, and I know the scores are not on the screen, don't worry about it, half a point each. We have a mainline Rui, d3, b5. We have d6 played. So not any sort of martial stuff because white has played d3. White has not played c3, h3. So we have just kind of a very slow and maneuvering Spanish. I mean, we might get a knight a5. We'll see what we get. Bishop to b7. Yeah, this is all very normal. Bishop c2. Bishop f8. This has been played many times, including in many World Championship matches, I believe, by Anatoly Karpov, if I'm not mistaken. And white tries to choose here between d4, a4, and also just a very slow rerouting process. Well, there you go. There's the slow. Well, there's a4, and here's knight f1. So he's combining two plans. He reroutes the knight to f1 to bring it here and maybe to those squares, and he also attacks on the queen side, right? But now d5. So Jan attacks the middle of the board. He has that nice position. Bishop on b7 about to come alive. We have knight to g3, c5. Okay, I mean, listen, you're going to give Jan all sorts of space in the middle. He's going to take it. I mean, right? It's just free space. At this point, white can already begin thinking about take, bishop g5 to take, and just kind of liquidating, honestly, just getting rid of some pieces. Yesipenko plays bishop d2 and tries to attack the queen side, but Jan's right there. And I mean, Jan has that nice glue in the position. If you take on c4 here, black could take with D. He chooses to take with B, and the pressure continues. And black is also a move away from playing d4. So for example, let's just say white plays king h1, black marches in. I mean, he just continues to go forward because he has that. So that's why Andrei plays captures, and I told you a moment ago, maybe Andrei wants to consider removing some pieces from the board. Now, you got to be really damn sure before you give away a bishop for a knight like this that you're doing the right thing. You got to be 100% sure, because that's a bishop. That's a long-range piece. And without it, you're allowing the enemy light-scored bishop to stand permanently on b7. So what is Yesipenko thinking? He's thinking queen trade. Jan's thinking, I'm good. Spasibo большое, but I don't want a queen trade. Knight d2, but now this bishop is active. What could possibly be the idea? Just knight d5. Rook is coming in a moment. Knight is going to hit on c3. Knight is going to maybe hit on e3. But okay, maybe knight e4. Maybe one of the knights is going to come to e4, queen c2. There you go. Knight f4. We're trying to work together with that bishop. Knight is going to come to d3 potentially. White plays f3. It's an ugly move. It looks like an ugly move, but actually white has stability here. And here Andrei can take on f4. If queen f4, there is a queen e2, and this pawn is actually going to die. But if pawn takes f4, the pressure is kind of off of white's center. The pawns don't pressure anything. The bishops do, the rooks do. But Andrei plays queen c2, and this moment of hesitation allows Jan to kind of continue moving forward. You have another chance to take on f4. Andrei goes back to f2 to try to remove the rook. So maybe he's thinking rook will go back to d8. I will put my knight here. This is good for me. I like this coordination of knights. And then I will put my rook on the d file. He plays knight to f2. And Jan detonates a haymaker. You're not going back. Rook takes d2. Dynamite strikes. Kaboom. And that's it. This is the game is over. What? How is the game over? I don't understand. Well, in chess, sometimes one strong blow like this, a second one follows. I've been telling you to keep an eye on this bishop. This defense of the position is an illusion. Knight takes g2. The knight jumps in front of the king, and f3 no longer has adequate defenses. The rook is hit. If you take, the queen comes in. The king is devastated by the attack. It's mate in a couple of moves. Bishop f3. I mean, I don't know. You're gonna lose. Okay, the game is over. Maybe you could have even lost a little bit faster, but I think, I mean, it's just a mate in 10, I think. We have rook e4 trying to give back some material, and that bishop on b7 just stays alive. It's not even worth it because the bishop is so strong. Knight wants to come back and deliver a mate, and he attacks the rook again. Knight comes back to f4, and Jan wins. Jan wins this game by virtue of just a very belligerent attack. That bishop moved once, but oh, how powerful it was. The bishop went to b7 and did nothing else. Jan is up 1.5 to half. Next game, Andrei with the white piece. Andrei now has to defend with the black pieces. Andrei had a game with white. He lost. Now he has to defend with black and stabilize in order to try to win with white to force some sort of playoff. So we have e4. We have a position actually very similar to last game. I mean, this might look almost identical for a very long time, but this time we have bishop g5. Now, if you remember a couple of games ago, we saw h3 on move 8. Well, now we have this. You see? Slight difference of position, huh? Well, now we have bishop g5 by Nepo instead of h3. So not preventing the bishop from coming out, but rather pinning this knight to the queen. And Andrei plays h6. And oftentimes in positions like this, black can get to play g5. Right, this is sort of what white might be hoping for. Maybe white is actually hoping for a very dynamic position. It's one of the drawbacks, in air quotes, drawbacks of putting the bishop out like that. Right, so g5, knight back to h7, and black just wants to move the king off this diagonal and play f5, and just belligerent, just assault on the king side. But Nepo's right there. He strikes in the middle. When a guy leaves the center of the board, it's a good thing to advance in the middle. We've seen Nepo play this d3, d4 a couple of times. Now he plays h3. The idea of h3, multi-purpose. Preventing a bishop from coming to g4 right away. Knight h2 is another idea. So for example, h5 played by black, knight bd2, and at some point you're going to be ready to bring something to the h2 square if necessary. h4, there it is. We see the reason. And now g4. Andrei is pissed off. He is trying to get this win back for what just happened in that last game. Takes. Position looks good. So what does Jan do? Calmly retreats. Calmly retreats. The pawn in the middle looks like it can be taken, but CD4, you can't grab this because I have my boomerang defense, right? I move into the middle, but I still can come back and defend. So, Queen F6. Andrei still going forward. Knight C4. Hits this, but more importantly, hits the E3 square. And after you get rid of this bishop, you want to go to D5 or F5. This position's very loose for black. If black can get a couple of moves, King H8, Rook G8, get the bishop out of the way, and actually launch an attack, black is doing very well. The problem is, you're not going to let black do that. You now have 4 things hitting the center. It's about to get real ugly. Black now has to react. He takes the knight, right? We have bishop F3, and now here comes the knight from the back. I mean, this looks great for black. It looks like an extremely dynamic attack. Here's the problem. The guy playing with the white pieces is arguably one of the best dynamic players of the modern generation. I mean, Jan he's so quick, and he's got so much, his chess is so clever, right? So he just plays knight e3. He's like, yeah, go ahead and take. Who cares if you take my bishop? I'm going to take with the pawn, play king h1. We're both going to move our kings. Who's even winning here? Who's even attacking cool? Or maybe I'm going to play f4. Why am I going to let you attack me? Rook here, and queen h5 is coming. My king is actually completely safe on h1. Your bozo on h8 is wide open. You're the one that took all your clothes off and went running in the lagoon. I mean, listen, don't look at me. I don't know what your king is into. King h8 is actually quite weak. So Yesipenko takes on d4. But now Jan says, I got no reason to take back here. Knight d5. This game is all about time. One move at a time, right? So you take on d4. Now I play bishop g4. You can't even take my knight. You can't play f5. What is black going to do? Suddenly black's attack looking a little bit sus. Take. Okay, knight e5. Andrei still trying to make active moves. Take, bishop f5. Where's the attack? I mean, this bishop looks quite strong, but okay, you play queen g3 and? I mean, I'm just going to defend this. There's no attack here. Knight f6 check. King g7, I fork you. If you play here, I don't know, queen h5 check. It's probably just game over. I don't know. I imagine I have some sort of mate here. I don't know where it is, but I would not be shocked if there is one. Although computer here is saying king h1, which is just pure savagery, with the intention to play knight g4 and queen h6. Amazing. I mean, Jan would find it. I don't know if I would find that over the board, but Jan would find it. Andrei plays rook e8, and yeah, well, I mean, he doesn't play king h1, but he plays just king f1, moving the bishop, moving the king off the bishop's diagonal, and f4 is ready. f4, rook e3, maybe queen h4, something to the h file. I mean, it's like, it's right there. d5, Andrei trying to strike in the middle. You know, he's like, well, if I open up the position, everything is good. My rook, my bishop, my queen, everything's nice. And Jan's like, yeah? You sure? E takes d5. Who's attacking who? My favorite quote. Take h4? Your queen can't be the one guarding your king. Your queen has to be attacking. Notice how white's queen has a distant view on the king, but is actually attacking. What is this queen doing? The queen can't be snuggling the king in the middle of a storm. I mean, the queen's the most powerful piece. It's got to go be out in the field beating some ass. All right? It's not happening here. Takes, cd5, and for a brief moment, we have material stability. But white is better. And white is better because the knight and the king and the queen are all just sort of tied together. Rook e8, rook d5. He is slightly better here, but after knight e4, a tragic blunder. He was hoping for bishop e4. Obviously, the queen is hanging. Just queen takes. A move that looks impossible, but rook d8, and the game is over. Tragic. Queen takes e4, and Jan out of nowhere wins game number 3 and wins the match. 2.5 half, 2 extremely convincing wins after a wild first game. And I mean, Jan came to play today, folks. Jan came to play. I mean, this man, you might have some perception of him after the World Championship match, and obviously Magnus being so dominant there, but it's Magnus, for God's sake. You know what I mean? I mean, like, Jan has played out of his mind in this event, and he is our first finalist, which takes me to the match between Magnus Carlsen and Vladislav Artemiev. And not even to mention, I mean, I told you, Jan was one of the first people who tweeted out, "Say no to war." Like I said, the #1 ranked Russian chess player saying that is, I can't imagine what that's like. I can't. You have to give the man all the credit in the world. He wins and he's the finalist. c4, e5, but obviously doesn't take anything away from Yesipenko. He also did tweet out, but of course, Jan being the world championship contender, there's so many eyes on him, right? Anyhow, Magnus begins against Artemiev with an English opening. This is one of the best, by the way, if anybody's looking for like kind of a very easy opening to play, especially when your opponent doesn't challenge it, just kind of wants to develop their own pieces. Knight c3, knight e2, and try to play for d4. This is a really, really nice English. The other thing that you do here is expand on the queen side. Let's see what Magnus does. So d4, we have ed, ed, rook e8, and h3. h3 is always a nice move, just kind of covering everything over here. King can always comfortably step out of the middle. Black plays knight e7, and we have rook e1 fighting for the middle. Bishop f4, targeting the slight weakness, not a huge weakness, and also this bishop might be having to come back if it ever gets targeted. c5, and I think, folks, you know what's going to come quite soon. It's b4, a4, and b5. Now, we do have a little bit of a tactical situation here in the middle as Artemiev sacrifices a pawn. You'll notice that he just straight up loses a pawn, but he does this so that white doesn't have the light-scored bishop. But Magnus is trying to go to d6. I apologize, that was a misclick. That obviously didn't happen. Knight f5, Magnus plays knight c3, and he says, yo, Vlad, I know you can hit this with 3 different pieces, but I'm actually not concerned whatsoever. Look at the black position. Look at that juicy d6 square. Ooh, that looks real nice. Doesn't that look real nice? I'm gonna get in there to d6. Vlad plays bishop e6. Magnus plays bishop e5. He's trying to get his weakness out of the middle and dominant dark squared control. If this Magnus gets this, the game is just simply over. Bishop e5. What is Vlad gonna do? He plays b6. Magnus plays b4. Okay, we have a couple of captures, and white still has an extra pawn. I don't know where this compensation is going to come from on black's side. I mean, at some point, you're going to play g4 and remove the knight from the middle as well. a5, b5, takes. White is still a pawn up. And now that pawn is a past c pawn. So folks, I don't know what's going on here. I mean, I don't know. Bishop d5, Magnus jumps into d6. Rook e5. This doesn't look like a good configuration of pieces. It looks very, very suspiciously tight together there. And let's see if Magnus can find his way through. He takes on f5. Pawn takes f5. And now queen d4. Uh-oh. If you play f6 to block the pin, I just grab it. Rook e1, queen f6. Doesn't matter. I can take on d5. I have 2 extra pawns. C pawn's queening, queen d7, rook e6. It all looks absolutely outstanding. So queen d4, Magnus actually goes knight d6. He doesn't take on f6, but it's all still very good. And the attack just, roars on. He is 3 pawns up. In this position, after rook e1, queen c3, Magnus can play, I think, queen e7, king g8, and something like king h2. And I think there's a force mate. I think there's some force mate here. White basically tries to get a blockade of the queen. Like, for example, a4, rook e5 is the idea. So not the craziest thing in the world. I mean, for example, if black tries to play queen b2, queen f2, you kick out the queen, and then you try to play for rook e5. But you also need to not get mated on your own. Not the craziest thing in the world, but Magnus just chooses this way. He sacrifices material, but Artemiev hasn't moved the rook in 33 moves. Okay, congratulations. Now you resign. Artemiev got to move his rook 1 time. And he resigned because, he's completely swarmed. His king has no moves. The threat of mate on knight d6. Yes, you can give a check. I go here. That's it. Now, the way Magnus makes it look so easy against these guys, I wouldn't be shocked if you go run this game through some sort of, Lee Chess or chess.com analysis. I guarantee it was nearly a perfect game. Honestly, it really felt that way. Maybe there was some different, for example, a computer is going to give Magnus some points off for not playing a mate in 10, right? Or it's going to give Magnus a couple of points off for not playing knight takes f6, which is the top computer move. But that felt like such a good game. And he makes it look so easy. Now, Artemiev is looking to bounce back with the white pieces. And we actually have a Grunfeld. Now, I don't know the last time Magnus Carlsen played the Grunfeld. I don't know. I actually think it was in the World Cup against Sasha Martinovic from Croatia. You can look this up. I don't know. I think that's the last time that Magnus actually played the Grunfeld. We have knight f3 and bishop g5. So this is one of the main lines. That's a bit of a strong... No, it's not one of the main lines, but it's one of the lines. And black in the Grunfeld just launches a massive attack on the middle of the board with, you know, various moves like knight c6, bishop g4, attacking this knight and everything. I don't know where these guys left theory. I'm inclined to believe that even all this has been reached many, many times before. You know, black is completely fine here, but white has more activity on these files, obviously, c1 and b1. Black struggles a little bit with development because anywhere you put this bishop, it's gonna be a target for the white pawns or the white knight, and just white's king is actually kind of safe, even though it doesn't look so safe here. So knight c6 by Magnus, rook hb1. Now, when you play rook hb1, it's very clear you probably want to push your a-pawn. This move looks completely absurd to the untrained eye. It's like, why didn't he play rook ab1? Yeah, when you let the computer think here, it thinks to play like this. But okay, rook hb1. At some point, Artemiev will probably... There you go, he plays a4. And now the justification is there for keeping the rook on that file, right? Knight a5. Magnus is like, I'm not going to let you play a5. Artemiev's like, no problem. I'm going to go get rid of your knight, and then I'm going to play a5. Magnus plays bishop b7. He's not worried about this. He's going to try to get this pawn and also stop these pawns from moving forward. g4. Very nice idea. Prevents some movement of pawns here. Maybe tries to take some space in the long run. Because again, in modern era, the computer loves stuff like this. It absolutely loves just random h-pawn excursion to just get that space, isolate that enemy weakness in the long run. So g4 actually is a very interesting move, right? We have rook ac8, rook c1 f6, and now, well, Artemiev plays g5. So Magnus has a very tough decision to make. If you take on g5 here, this pawn sucks. If you push f5, that square sucks. And actually, black is positionally lost. That's the craziest thing. h4, and black can't get this main pawn break, so black is suffocating. Like, with no pawn breaks, black is just going to suffocate to death here, because you're just going to play h5, h6. Or you're going to play h5, create a weakness, and get that weakness, knight f3, knight h4, and get that weakness. So it's just amazing what one pawn move can do, and Magnus just chills. He's like, yo, come and get me. And Artemiev's like, okay, all right, bishop c7. Rook comes up to d7, bishop right back. Let's trade rooks, Magnus. Let's trade a pair of rooks. Give me the open file. Magnus is like, nah, I'm good. You want to draw? Artemiev's like, no, I think I'm better. Now, at this point, what I think Artemiev should have done was bishop g4. Idea being, you force f5. Then you trade the bishop. And I just told you that that e5 liability is a problem. Now, here there are still tactics. Knight b3, you got to calculate all this, rook b1, and you got to be sure that you have a good position here. Not so easy to do. White is better, but black is absolutely still in the game. Material is completely equal, but structurally, positionally, white has the better kind of corresponding weaknesses to black. White's weaknesses are really not that fatal, right? This pawn is weak, sure, but you can always play knight d2 or knight e5. Artemiev plays bishop f3. So he keeps this pawn exactly where it is and just tries to focus on that side of the board. Now, you'll notice actually something very similar happens. Very similar. Rook d1, right? Only difference is this pawn's not here. And these pawn pushes are included. Who does this benefit? I don't know. We're about to find out. King f7, very complex game. Topsy-turvy game. Artemiev is still trying to apply pressure. Magnus is still trying to defend. d5, maybe e4, e5 on the cards. Just push, push, push while this bishop is super trash. Knight back to c5. But here's the point. In a lot of these Grunfeld endgames and middle games, that loner a-pawn, what happens to it? What do you do with it? Like, I mean, honestly, what do you do with it? Rook d4. Bishop g7. Takes. But now what? If white plays e4 here, black just attacks the weakness. If white plays d6 here, white just attacks the weakness. How does white make progress? Okay, let's make progress with our king and our knight. We'll play it slowly. Let's trade rooks. Magnus here plays a very classy move, rook c5. Take me instead. I would like you to capture my rook. Artemiev says no, f3. If you take on d5, I'm going rook c7, rook a7. Magnus is like, okay, you can take my pawn, rook a5. Trade rooks with me, Vlad. Trade rooks with me. You have to, because if you don't, I take a4. Okay. Now, I'm sure you're all thinking this is just going to be a very quick draw. Knight b3, knight b6, they trade pawns, right? Go home. But you're playing Magnus Carlsen. He is going to torture you for a little bit. King d5. In any endgame, the person who has slightly more activity and a slightly better pawn structure can play the game forever. Right now, black has better activity because his king is more active, his knight is a little bit more active targeting the king, and he has a clump of 3, whereas white has 2 and 1. This is a liability, and not just as a weakness, but also as a potential lever to trade pawns in a beneficial way for one of the sides. So for example, you could, there's situations you can trade the pawn, like if this pawn was back here, trade and create an outside passer. That can still happen. You can trade this pawn, take with the bishop, and the h-pawn becomes a passed pawn. That is one of the ways you can use one of the enemy's passed pawns against them. Now, at this point, Artemiev can play slowly. He can maybe do this. Magnus might go for a bishop versus knight endgame, so he might try to look for an endgame somewhere like this. Artemiev plays e4, take, and just plays bishop f4 like nothing. Like, nothing's going on. Just bishop f4 and that's it. And Magnus puts the pawns on h5, right? Puts a pawn on h5. Whenever you're playing a bishop of same color endgame, you want to strand your opponent's pawn on the same color as your bishop, and you want your pawns to stand on the opposite color, right? And that's why opposite color bishop endgames are just a draw, because you just blockade. But this is not an opposite colored bishop endgame. And it's a position where Magnus can play. And Magnus can play, and it just looks like there's nothing. If you take too quickly, knight versus bishop is a simple draw, because black just can't get through. So we have king d4, we have king d3, we have king e4. But Magnus can't even get close. He can't get close to the h4 pawn. Guys, just make a draw. Magnus, come on, let's go home. But no, you're playing Magnus Carlsen. He is going to play, and he is going to play, and he is going to try to make you fall asleep at the wheel. You notice Artemiev finally is like, all right, I got to do something with my bishop here. Let's send this into a knight endgame. Magnus is like, okay, let the torture begin again. Knight c6, right? Knight back to g5. Knight d8. The video didn't freeze. Artemiev's out of moves. Artemiev is out of moves. He had to go to d6. He had to go to d6 and come around this way. A kind of lackadaisical back and forth allows knight d8, and white is lost. Why is white lost? Well, if you move your king, you allow king g4. If you play knight h7 to try to get the knight back into the game, then after knight to e6, knight to f6, there is king f3. So Levy, I don't understand. King h2, knight f4. Now the king can't get close. It's called Zugzwang. No matter where white moves, you give up the positioning to the king. I win your second pawn. I'm up 2 pawns in a knight endgame, and I'm winning. Knight d8 on move 72, and Magnus Carlsen cruises the knight to c4. He tries to get the king in closer. He gets it as close as possible, so now the white king can't come close, and the knight can't move. Knight e3 check, knight g4 check, king to g... He gets even closer with the king, so the white king is completely kicked out, and now he's ready to pick up. Here come the pawns. Now, you don't lose both pawns here. Do not lose both pawns. You have to only allow yourself to get one of them captured. Magnus dances around, finally coordinates the knight with the pawn to advance. King h3, h4, king g4, h3. Beautiful tactic. If knight takes h3, it's a check. King h4, king h2. Magnus correctly calculates that for the investment of 1 pawn temporarily, white has no moves. White has no moves. White can't come back with the king, and g2 is about to happen, so the knight's going to move. It goes to g5. It could go here, but then I fork you. I'm forking you, and I'm removing the knight. Knight g5, g2. Now, at this point, don't make a queen and blunder a fork. So knight f3, don't do that. Knight f3 check, king h1. Don't blunder the fork. It's time to deflect the knight with the knight. Knight d4. If you take, I make a queen. And on move 103, Vladislav Artemiev resigns because he is out of moves. He has no moves with his knight. He has no moves with his king. Magnus Carlsen is a cold-blooded savage. Obviously, he wins the match. It's only 2-0, but they drew the next game. After you lose a game like this, like you're done. You just want to go for a walk. And our final tomorrow is a rematch of the World Chess Championship. Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. Stay tuned. And once again, if you made it this far in the video, I just want to reiterate what I said in the introduction. Unfortunately, it's a little bit too optimistic to just say something like, we are all, one species, and we should all treat each other with respect. And to have armed conflict of this kind of scale in 2022 is just a travesty. But the truth is, at the moment, it is happening in Ukraine and it's horrible, but it also is happening all over the world. And I just wish that the people of Ukraine are going to be okay. I wish that the people of Russia who go out and protest find some degree of safety, because I know that's a very, very difficult thing to do in Russia. And yeah, I mean, what can you say? I will continue to be here as a beacon of hope, maybe in these dark times. I will continue to be here with my chess content. Just know that, I hope these words resonate with some of you. I'll see you all tomorrow for the final.